We have always said that we will apply tariffs where they had the maximum impact in the United States and a minimum impact in Canada. And so we don't automatically adjust.
This guy's coming at us. I just want to go on record. He's coming full bore at us. He's not, this isn't going to be a church picnic. This is going to be, let's get down to it and we'll see what happens. I'm praying that everything's going to go fine.
Steel, aluminum, and national pride are being crushed at the same time. When the Trump administration suddenly doubled tariffs on imported steel and aluminum, Canadians expected a strong response from their own government. But instead of a forceful reply, Ottawa chose silence. No retaliatory tariffs, no warnings, no countermeasures. And now, outrage is building among thousands of workers who feel they've been sold out in the name of diplomacy.
Washington delivered a brutal blow in tariffs on steel and aluminum, two of Canada's industrial pillars. It wasn't the first shock, but it was the most painful. While other nations pushed back hard, Canada responded with politeness.
I think the next few weeks are going to kind of be slow, but, the president's got some other priorities.
The government thanked its U.S. counterpart for continued talks and emphasized calm. That message landed like a slap in the face to thousands of Canadian steelworkers who now feel utterly abandoned. The government argues that 85% of Canada-U.S. trade remains tariff-free, but what they don't say is this: the remaining 15% represents the livelihoods of millions: steel in Hamilton, aluminum in Quebec, lumber in British Columbia. And while the U.S. targets those very sectors, Canada takes the hit, quietly, passively.
Trump's goal? To use tariffs to create instability to force jobs back to the U.S.
We'll be putting a tariff on of approximately 100% on chips and semiconductors. But if you're building in the United States of America, there's no charge.
Ottawa says the first USMCA review is coming in just 9 months, and that's why Canada needs to stay calm. But is this really strategy or just fear disguised as caution? The U.S. isn't waiting for the review to strike. They're already pressuring, already squeezing. And Canada is stuck hoping that maybe, just maybe, Trump will change his mind. That's not a plan. That's a gamble on silence. Officials claim they'll only retaliate when it hurts the U.S. more than it hurts Canada. Sounds rational, but what does it mean in practice? So far, the industries under attack have seen little to no real defense. Meanwhile, Washington continues to escalate. At what point does this smart strategy become obvious in action? How many jobs must be lost? How many plants must shut down before Ottawa decides to act? Instead of pushing back, the government touts investments in domestic resilience, skills training, and competitiveness. These are fine ideas, on paper, but for a laid-off worker facing rent and groceries, they're meaningless slogans. In the middle of a trade war, people need a shield, not promises about some distant future. In global trade, strength belongs to those who hit and take the hit. The United States has struck, but rather than stand up for its workers, Canada's government has chosen to duck. This restraint may be called strategy, diplomacy, or pragmatism, but for those losing jobs, losing factories, and losing hope, it looks a lot like surrender. And if Ottawa doesn't change course soon, it won't just be steel and aluminum that collapse, it'll be the public's faith in their government's will to protect them.
Canada intends to recognize the State of Palestine at the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly in September 2025.
Donald Trump does not support the creation of a Palestinian state and criticised Canada's decision on social media. That will make it very hard for us to make a trade deal with them, Trump said.
The air in Ottawa is heavier than ever. With less than 1 day to go before the critical trade deadline, a political bomb has exploded across the border. Donald Trump has openly threatened to shut down trade with Canada after Prime Minister Carney confirmed plans to support Palestinian statehood if conditions are met. Just after midnight, Trump blasted on Truth Social. Wow, Canada has just announced that it is backing statehood for Palestine. That will make it very hard for us to make a trade deal with them. Oh, Canada! This wasn't diplomacy. This was a blunt ultimatum. Trump has hijacked the trade talks and turned them into a geopolitical pressure campaign. For months, negotiations have dragged on with slow progress. But now, Canada's political stance on the Israel-Palestine issue has triggered an economic threat. Trump views Canada's move as betrayal, especially while he tries to consolidate U.S. influence in the Middle East.
The president has signed that. He has increased the rate from 25% to 35%. It is important for everybody listening and watching to understand what that means.
His retaliation? A 35% tariff across Canadian goods unless Ottawa folds.
Carney had previously insisted Canada wouldn't sign any deal at any cost. Now he's facing a wall of demands. Trump wants Canada to accept a deal modeled after the EU and Japan, where Washington dictates purchases and demands silence on foreign policy.
If Donald Trump's threats are real, Canada has just hours to secure a trade deal with the U.S. The deadline, midnight Eastern.
And Trump has already made a move. He just ordered a 35% tariff on semi-finished copper products from Canada effective August 1. This isn't negotiation, it's a chokehold. Within Canada, frustration is exploding. Provincial premiers, especially from Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario, are publicly blasting Ottawa. One Western premier stated bluntly, "Instead of defending our economy, Ottawa's picking political fights that get working Canadians punished."
We haven't spoken to Canada today. He's called, and we'll see.
Many provinces now openly favor stronger U.S. ties, pointing out they trade more with U.S. states like Texas and Montana than with Ontario or Quebec. Some leaders even hinted at revisiting sovereignty discussions if Ottawa keeps isolating itself diplomatically and economically. If no deal is reached by August 1, Trump has vowed to impose 35% tariffs on goods not complying with CUSMA, the Canada-US-Mexico agreement. Sectors at risk include steel and aluminum, automobiles and parts, pharmaceuticals and semiconductors, softwood lumber.
1 year ago, we were a dead country. Now we're the hottest country in the world. Look at you people. We're the hottest country anywhere in the world. We're doing great.
All are now labeled national security interests by Trump, giving him legal cover for sweeping tariffs. This is an economic ransom note, plain and simple. Trump boasts about recent trade wins with the EU and Japan. Now he's sending a clear message. If Canada doesn't obey, I'll just slap tariffs and move on. Meanwhile, Canada's negotiators have little room to maneuver. Despite appearances, both Ambassador Kirsten Hillman and Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc acknowledge the odds are low for a deal before the deadline. Even Carney, while in PEI, said talks had entered an intense phase, a diplomatic way of saying everything's falling apart. This is no longer about trade, it's a raw power struggle, and Canada is caught in the middle. Trump has laid out the terms: surrender political independence or suffer a full-blown economic assault. Ottawa may be trying to hold the line, but time is running out, and the real question now isn't whether Canada will suffer, it's how deep the damage will be, and who, in the end, will pay the price.
The U.S. marks its latest trade deal, this time with the European Union.
This doesn't portend well, very well for Canada.
It's the tariffs that Canada has put on goods coming in from the U.S. that are hurting the people in Alberta the most.
There is no longer a country called Canada, only a lonely nation named Ottawa. This phrase, once dismissed as political theater, now echoes with unsettling truth. As global powers like Japan and the European Union race ahead with new trade pacts with the United States, Canada finds itself dangerously isolated. Worse still, the unrest is no longer limited to average citizens. The country's own premiers, the pillars of federal unity, are now openly clashing with Ottawa. What we're witnessing is not just a political rift, it's the slow unraveling of a nation's core.
Unfortunately, for Canadians, the stakes are far too high. The affordability crisis is very real. We are in a vulnerable position.
At the latest meeting of Canada's premiers, frustration boiled over. Ontario's premier didn't hold back, declaring, "We buy more U.S. products than Japan, China, the UK, and France combined. We're their #1 customer, and we shouldn't have to beg for respect." Alberta's voice was even sharper. While Ottawa waits for negotiations, we lose billions in exports and jobs. Quebec joined the chorus, blasting federal inaction as not just weak, but dangerous. These are not isolated complaints. This is a coordinated message from Canada's provinces. Enough is enough. The trust is gone. Ottawa is standing alone. While Canada waits, the U.S. has already finalized deals with Japan and the EU, both securing major tariff reductions, especially in auto exports.
I think it's the biggest deal ever made. Thank you very much.
The baseline 15% tariff rate granted to them stands in stark contrast to the looming 35% Canada now faces on key exports if no deal is reached by August 1st. President Trump, speaking bluntly, said, "We haven't had a lot of luck with Canada. Maybe there's no negotiation. Maybe it's just a tariff." For a country once seen as America's closest economic partner, that's not just a warning, it's a public demotion. In Windsor, auto plants are reducing shifts. In St. Catharines and Oshawa, supply chain delays are stacking up. Small manufacturers say they're already absorbing losses from steel and aluminum tariffs. Farmers in Saskatchewan, exporters in Quebec, they all report rising costs, dropping confidence, and fewer trade routes. For the past decade, Canadian businesses thrived under predictable NAFTA-era terms.
That's what the MOU is about today, is how can we find a way to support each other, and then in addition to that, find a way to get to new markets.
Today, they operate under a fog of uncertainty, while Ottawa urges patience that industries can no longer afford. Confidence is collapsing, investment is drying up, and workers are paying the price. Across social media, a wave of frustration is swelling. Buy Canadian slogans have turned into sarcastic hashtags. People ask, buy what? The shelves are empty or overpriced. Consumers feel trapped, paying more for less with no leadership in sight.
Premier Smith and Premier Moe said, we have to be leaders in the G7 when it comes to our economy, and we need to unleash every tool in our Canadian toolbox and tell the world that Canada's open for business.
Many accuse Ottawa of chasing the illusion of a perfect deal while letting real opportunities vanish. Even staunch federalists now echo provincial sentiments that Ottawa no longer understands or serves the everyday Canadian. The anger isn't just about trade, it's about identity and a feeling that the country is slipping away from its people. Canada is at a crossroads. While Ottawa still clings to the belief that the right deal will come, the provinces are moving on. Premiers are no longer asking politely, they are demanding autonomy, demanding action. The longer Ottawa waits, the deeper the rift grows. What remains is not just a gap in policy, but a canyon in trust. And if this trajectory continues, what we'll be left with is not a nation, but a lonely capital called Ottawa, surrounded by provinces already charting their own course toward a different future.
We had a meeting. I wasn't sure. I said 50-50. I think you probably felt the same thing.
Just 1 hour. That's all it took for the President of the United States to go from calling a trade deal with the European Union a 50-50 chance, to walking onto a stage and announcing the biggest trade deal ever made. This pattern isn't new.
I think Canada could be one where they'll just pay tariffs, not really a negotiation.
Days before, Trump used the same tactic with Canada, telling reporters there might be no deal at all and that Ottawa might have to just pay tariffs. Then, almost like clockwork, he flipped the script with Europe, moving from doubt to triumph within hours. It's less about negotiation at the table and more about building suspense for a dramatic reveal. From the outside, this might look like strength, but it's also carefully staged. Much of the real bargaining happens behind closed doors, while the public announcements are crafted to create headlines. For countries like Canada, this raises a critical question. If others are signing just to escape tariffs, should Canada resist this pattern and hold out for something more substantial? What Trump calls a deal is often just a framework, broad outlines without binding details. There are no published timelines, no enforcement mechanisms, and no clear terms on what happens if a partner country fails to deliver on its promises. This ambiguity gives Trump the power to redefine the terms at any moment, even after the handshake and the cameras are gone. It's a political advantage, but it leaves trading partners exposed. For Canada, this is both a warning and an opportunity. Instead of rushing to mimic what Japan or Europe accepted, Ottawa could push for stronger, enforceable terms, a real agreement that won't shift with the president's next press conference.
Well, the bottom line is that the American people are going to be paying a 15% tax on any imports from the world's second largest collective economy, and that's the European Union. That is not a good thing for American consumers.
Behind the showmanship, someone has to pay, and that someone is the American consumer. The 15% tariff on EU imports, announced with great fanfare, applies broadly, with limited exceptions for pharmaceuticals. Steel and aluminum imports still face 50% tariffs. For everything else, the price goes up. Businesses that rely on European parts, machinery, or raw materials now face higher costs, which will inevitably flow down to consumers. Whether it's auto components from Germany or specialty foods from Italy, the checkout price in American stores is climbing. The ripple effects go even further. U.S. small businesses that assemble imported goods or use European inputs in manufacturing will be hit the hardest. Unlike multinationals, they have limited ability to absorb cost increases or reconfigure supply chains. For many, this means slowing hiring, cutting hours, or passing costs directly to customers. In a fragile inflationary environment, these hidden taxes could undercut household budgets and business confidence alike. Meanwhile, the much-hyped benefits, like $600 billion in European investments or $750 billion in energy purchases, are vague and spread over years. There's no guarantee how much of that will create jobs or lower prices for ordinary Americans. In the short term, it's a tax disguised as a trade victory. This is where Canada might find leverage. By aligning with U.S. industries that depend on cross-border trade, such as auto manufacturers in Michigan or food processors in Wisconsin, Canada can highlight how tariffs hurt both economies.
We will, obviously, we're working on behalf of Canadians, and we will agree